So this is the lesson for 6-1, graphing points and identifying quadrants. When we go to graph points, all points are written as coordinates or ordered pairs. These three terms all mean the same thing: a point, a coordinate, or an ordered pair. All three of those things mean the same exact thing. Points, coordinates, and ordered pairs are all written x, comma, y. Notice that it's inside parentheses and with a comma. On the state test, they are very, very picky about that notation with the parentheses and the comma. When we go to write a point, the x value is how many places you go left or right, depending on whether it's negative or positive. And the y value is how many places you go up or down. Many, many times I will say, instead of left or right, I will say over, because over could be left or right. All right. So if you see me write the word over, that just means left or right. So when we take a look at our coordinate plane, all right, this is what a coordinate plane is. We have two axes, all right? We have the x-axis and we have the y-axis. An easy way to remember the x-axis versus the y-axis is think of a word that starts with the letter Y. Well, the letter Y, a very simple word, is the word yes. If you nod your head yes up and down, that is the same way that the y-axis goes, all right? So the y-axis goes up and down. The x-axis goes side to side, all right? So when you go to graph your points and write your points, your first number is how many you go left or right. The second number is how many you go up or down. So the point where the two axes intersect is called the origin. This point right here in the middle is the point 0, 0. All right, that point is 0, 0 right in the middle. That is called the origin. So when we go to do these, there's three different types of questions that you're going to have today. The first set of directions will say graph and label each point. Now, again, remember your first number is how many you're going over. So how many you're going left or right. And the second number is how many we are going up or down. So when we go to graph a point, we always start right in the middle. We start right here at 0, 0. That's where we start counting from. All right, we start counting where the x and y axis cross at the origin at 0, 0. So if we're going to graph the letter A is 2, 4. Starting in the middle, we're going to go over to 2 and then up to 4. So this is where A would be. We went over to 2, up to 4. B is -4, 1. Starting in the middle, we're going to go over to -4 and up to +1. This is where B would be. The letter C is -3, -4. Starting in the middle, again, we're going over to -3 and down to -4. This is where C would be. D is 2, -3. Starting in the middle, over to 2, down to -3. This is where D would be. Again, where you're going to put the points is right where those two lines in the background grid cross. All right, we're lining up, and where they cross, that's where the point is. So we went over to 2, up to 4, over to -1, over to -4, up to +1, over to -3, down to -4, over to 2, down to -3. So I'd like you to try and think of where these points would be. All right. So think right now, where would 1, 5 be? Where would 1, 5 be? Take a look at your graph, figure out where 1, 5 would be. Starting in the middle, we would go over to 1, up to 5. A would be right here. Take a second and think about where -2, 3 would be. Take a look at where -2, 3 would be. We start in the middle. We go over to -2, up to +3. This is where B would be. Think about where -4, -3 would be. Think about where -4, -3 would be. Going over to -4, down to -3. This is where C would be. And take a look at, think about where 4, -1 would be. 4, -1. We start in the middle. We go over to 4, down to -1. This is where D would be. So that's one type of question that you're going to have today. You'll be given the point. You need to graph and label with the letter where the point would be. Your first number is how many you go over. Your second number is how many you go up or down. The next type of question is you are going to have to, we're going to work backwards. You're going to be given the point and you have to write down what the coordinates are. So again, remember your X value is how many you go over. Your Y value is how many you go up or down. So let's take a look at point A. Point A is right here. Well, I need to figure out how to get there. So starting in the middle, I need to go over first. You always go over first. Over to -2 and then up to +5. So A would be -2, comma 5. Because we started in the middle, we went over to -2, up to +5. Take a look at B. B is right here. So starting in the middle, I need to go over, you always go over first, over to -4. And now we're not going up or down any. Since we're not going up or down any, it's going to be over to -4. And you could either say up 0 or down 0. So we're just going to write 0. So this point is -4, 0. Take a look at C. C is down here. Starting in the middle, we're going over to 3, down to -4. Over to 3, down to -4. Take a look at D. D is right here. Starting in the middle, we're going over to 1, up to 2. So 1, 2. E. Now, E is a little bit tricky because it's on that axis. It's on that x-axis. Starting in the middle, we're going over to 5, and then we're not going up or down any. So over to 5 and up 0. F. F is right here. Again, this one's tricky because it's on the y-axis. Starting in the middle, are we going left or right any to get down to F? No, we're not. We're not going left any. We're not going right any. So we're going over 0, and then we're going down to -2. So we're going to write 0, -2, because we went over 0, down to -2. G. Starting in the middle, we're going over 0, but then we're going up to 3. So this is 0, 3. H. H is right here. Go over to -1, down to -4. So again, your first number is always how many you go over, how many you go left or right. And then your second number is how many you go up or down. Remember, you always start counting from right here, right at 0, 0, right in the middle. That's always where you start from. So what I would like you to do is I would like you to, on a piece of paper, write down A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, and I would like you to try these 8 questions, please. All right, write down the coordinates of each one. I'm going to give you about 1 minute to do this, and then I will go over them. So go ahead and try and write down the coordinates of these 8 points, please. Can give you about 30 seconds more. Should be about halfway done right now, at least. So taking a look at these, A, starting in the middle, we're going over to -3, up to +4. So -3, 4. B is right here. We're going over to -1. We're not going up or down any. So that is over to -1, and then we're going up or down 0. C is over here. Now, notice that on our graph, and this is how all your graphs will look like. Notice that it goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This one doesn't have a number right on the edge, but this is really 6. All right, this is really 6 going up here. This is really -6 over here. And this is really -6 at the bottom here. So C is over to 6, down to -2. So over to 6, down to -2. D. D is over to 4, up to 5. E. E is over 0, because we're not going left or right at all, but then we're going up to 3. So E would be 0, 3. F. F, we're not going up or we're not going left or right at all. All that we're doing is going down to -3. So it's over 0, down to -3. G. G, we're going over to 1, but then we're not going up or down at all. So over to 1, up 0. H, we're going over to -5, down to -2. So -5, -2. Again, the big thing that you need to remember is that the first number is how many we go over. The second number is how many go up or down. So the last type of question talks about quadrants. All right. The coordinate plane is divided into 4 different quadrants. All right. The coordinate plane, all right, is separated into like 4 sections. All right. If I follow my x axis and my y axis, we divide it into 4 separate areas. We have this yellow area right here. We have this green area right here. We have this orange area. And we have this red area. So these are our 4 quadrants, all right? It's sort of like 4 sections of your graph. Now, the way that quadrants are named, all right, quadrants are named with 1, 2, 3, and 4. They're named with numbers, all right? Sometimes you see them written as normal numbers like 1, 2, 3, and 4, but other times you might see them as Roman numerals, all right? So Roman numeral 1 is I, Roman numeral 2 is I. Roman numeral 3 is I, and Roman numeral 4 is IV. All right. So sometimes you see them written like this, sometimes you see them written like that. Now, which one is which? Well, think about a gigantic letter C. All right. Think about a gigantic letter C. If I was to take this gigantic letter C and do it so that it goes through each quadrant, we're going to start drawing that gigantic letter C is right here in the yellow. We're going to start here and we're going to draw our letter C. So we're drawing our letter C like this. And this is just the way to remember which quadrant is which. All right. If you think of the gigantic letter C, it starts off in quadrant number 1. It goes to quadrant number 2. Then it goes down to quadrant number 3, and it ends up in quadrant number 4. So we're starting here. We're going from quadrant 1 to 2 to 3 and ending up in 4. All right. So any point that's in this yellow area, if we had this point, all right, this point is 0.55. Any point in this yellow section would be in quadrant 1. Any point in this green section, let's say that we had -1, 1, this point right here. That point is in quadrant number 2. Let's say that we had -5, -2. We had this point. This point is in quadrant number 3 because it's in the orange section. And if we had 2, -2 right here, this would be in quadrant number 4. So any point that's in the area is in that quadrant. But again, remember the gigantic letter C, we go from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4. So go ahead and think about where each of these points are. What quadrant are each one of these points in? So again, if you remember the gigantic letter C, this goes from quadrant number 1 to quadrant number 2 to quadrant number 3, and it ends up in quadrant number 4. So C is in quadrant number 1. A is in quadrant number 2. B is in quadrant number 3. And D is in quadrant number 4. So that's the third type of question that you are going to have on your homework today. Again, the biggest thing that you need to remember that your first number in your coordinates or points are how many you go over. Your second number is how many you go up or down.